Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective as we continue to document and comment on the Spotify chronicles that are taking place right before our very eyes. Another solo episode for me today, so I could really use your support and participation in the live chat room. You know the deal. Super chats of $300 and up will be read on the show. But just today, because I really need your participation, all super chats will be read on the show. Okay, so as we discussed yesterday, Neil Young, the famous musician, announced, or he told Spotify, please remove my music from Spotify, the popular streaming service, unless you are willing to kick Joe Rogan's podcast off of your platform due to Joe Rogan interviewing various guests that Neil Young believes to be spreading misinformation regarding COVID-19 and the vaccines. We kind of explored the topic yesterday. I tried to caution against kind of making fun of Neil Young about this. I offered you a thought experiment. I said, what if Joe Rogan's show was broadcasting a point of view that you consider abhorrent? I mentioned, what if Joe Rogan or his guests were Holocaust deniers? Now, for some people, even that wouldn't be a deal breaker because a lot of people on the right have become the inverse, the negative, the film negative of the left. So the left for decades has said, what's so bad about communism? And I hate to say it, but these days, an increasingly alarming number of people on the right say, well, what's so bad about Nazis? At least they're not the left. So I'll ask you this. What if an organization, and these people do exist, I'm sorry to say, I think it's a small number of people, but they do exist, people that are pro-pedophilia, people that want to legalize and encourage sex between adults and children of all ages. So if this a organization or a person who promotes that view was, let's say, meeting at your local mall, would you then tell your mall, I'm not shopping at your location until you kick this organization out of your mall? Do you see what I'm saying? I'm trying to encourage everybody to think in terms of not just to say that anyone who wants to boycott anything is on the left and it's cancel culture and it's social justice warriors. I'm saying there may be a time to boycott. So suppose Joe Rogan were giving the Man Boy Love Association time on his podcast. He was interviewing them, even hypothetically was sympathetic, and it appeared to be raising numbers of people who were sympathetic to this particular cause. Would you then say, I'm no longer going to listen to music on Spotify because I'm boycotting Spotify until they kick this content off of their platform? Or if you were a musician like Neil Young, would you then pull your catalog off of Spotify? That was the point that I was saying. Do you ever see a reason to boycott? Now, from Neil Young's perspective and from the perspective of a lot of people, the type of opinions airing on Joe Rogan's podcast are spreading skepticism with regards to the vaccine. So let me offer you another thought exercise today. Suppose this was the Walking Dead virus going around. You know the show The Walking Dead? For those of you who don't know, it's a show about like a zombie apocalypse, although the word zombie never comes up. But there's a virus going around that you get it when you're bit by one of these zombies and it kills you within an hour, and then you wake back up an hour later and now you're a zombie going around looking for humans to bite and infect. So very lethal, very detrimental. Now, suppose there's a vaccine that could make this all go away. But Joe Rogan and his bonehead experts are slowing down the process of getting this vaccine out there and getting to people to take it. So in that scenario, if you were Neil Young, would you consider pulling your music off of Spotify? Do you see the point I'm making? I mean, it's a fantastic hypothetical because I tend to think the internet and Spotify would not exist in the world of The Walking Dead. But anyway, that's not the point. Okay, so yesterday I mentioned Neil Young pulled his music. He pulled his music off of Spotify. Spotify, they heard his ultimatum and they said, well, we're not kicking Joe Rogan off. So they removed Neil Young's music as requested. Neil Young was joined by one of the members of Bruce Springsteen's band, I think. I had his name in front of me a moment ago. It was doesn't matter anyway, because he's not on Spotify anymore. And also another pretty famous singer, a couple of famous singers have joined Neil Young in leaving Spotify over this issue of COVID and vaccine misinformation. Another development that's happened since is a singer named India Ari says she's pulling her music from Spotify over Joe Rogan, but it's not about COVID. In her case, it's because she doesn't like the interview that Joe Rogan did with Jordan Peterson regarding race. So from her perspective, it's, I guess it's not right to have a couple of white guys to sit around and talk about what, the Black experience or racism. For one reason or another, she feels that Spotify is not a platform she wants her music to be listed on if Joe Rogan is going to be on there. So again, I would say before laughing at her, ask yourself, would there be anything that would prompt you to boycott Spotify? That's kind of my question, rather than just kind of making fun of anybody who boycotts anything. Some of the headlines that I saw coming out since yesterday was like, Spotify lost more than $2 billion in market value after Neil Young pulled his music. And then another one says Spotify shares dropped 12%. And then another one says Spotify stock rebounds after Joe Rogan apology. So I tend to take all of these headlines with a grain of salt. I mean, even when you read these articles, a lot of the time you realize, oh, it was kind of clickbait, or they're sort of fudging the truth. They're blurring the truth a little bit because like maybe Spotify did plummet, but also the whole market plummeted during that time coincidentally. So I tend to stay away from talk of the stock market and finance and other things that I'm not that savvy with. I tend to defer to the Jonathan Honigs of the world to comment on. Jonathan Honig sends us $2.99 in the super chat, and Bonnie sent us $1.49. Thank you for that. Good to see the Americans supporting this UK network. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the sort of the history of Spotify and of streaming and of music on the internet and all of that. So from around the year 2000, around the time that the internet started to be in virtually everyone's home, high-speed internet, the music industry was suffering. And I think the main reason being music piracy. So a lot of young people were pirating music over the internet, and those are the people that tended to support new music. So pop music, new artists, it's very difficult to get those artists to generate money if the young people who previously would have bought their albums are now pirating all music. So yeah, music piracy was a huge issue around the year 2000, a little bit earlier, a little bit after, maybe a lot after. And, the issue of music piracy or now movie piracy, at some point became very easy as well as the internet got faster and sending big files became that much easier. And even software, like video editing software and music production software also became increasingly easy to pirate. The rampancy, is that a word? The rampant degree to which people pirate stuff is it does not lend itself. It does not encourage people to think that reason and rational egoism can overtake the world. You see what I'm saying? Like think back to Yaron Brooks' debate with Yoram Chazoni a month or two ago, when Yoram, the nationalist, he was saying, people think you're a sucker if you stay married. People think you're a sucker if you, act on principle, or that you follow the moral commandments, or that you follow morality, as opposed to just throwing that away and moving towards something flashy and new. And there is credibility to the point that he was making. I think there's a lot of ways in which Yoram is not seeing the full picture. There are many ways that the culture could be raising people to be more big picture oriented, more value driven. So going back to music piracy, which was very rampant when I was first becoming interested in music in my early teens, the adults were not setting a great example. The adults were, many of them, pragmatists. The culture had this sort of perspective, which was kind of like, yeah, of course, if you could get away with stealing, you do it. or something like that. Like, why would you pay for something you can have for free? So the adults were not setting a great example. A lot of adults were speaking out in favor of piracy. They thought Napster, the popular software, was a great thing. A lot of famous musicians were also speaking out in favor of it. But the thing is, it was never theirs to give away, meaning if Dave Grohl wants to give away his own music, that's one thing. It's certainly not up to him to give away the music that his record label owns a big piece of, or his bandmates. But even more than that, if Dave Grohl cannot voluntarily give away his neighbor's music or anyone else, other musicians' music. So it was absolutely theft. It still is theft. Piracy is theft. But how do we encourage the idea that people can be rationally selfish and it won't result in people being dishonest, right? Like, this was, I think, the point that Yoram Chazoni was making in his debate with Yoram. When we see people often reaching for something that they want without consideration for if it's the right thing to do or the bigger picture, then how are we supposed to believe that Ayn Rand's philosophy, if embraced by the culture, will lead to people thinking long-term and being rational? So I would say one aspect of it, which is very difficult to prove right now, is I think in a culture where the young are educated differently than they're educated now, in a culture where the young are not educated in a, Dewey influenced progressive education environment, but rather they're educated to think critically, to think independently, and they're taught the value of hard work in a way that maybe they're not today. And in various other ways, their children are raised in a more rational way than they are. I suppose you might see people being a lot more honest in general. Another aspect of it is the way that the culture will change is through art, through depictions of characters like Howard Rourke. Do you picture Howard Rourke in The Fountainhead pirating music that he wants or pirating anything? I mean, I couldn't picture Howard Rourke doing that, even if he's starving, right? Even if he's down to his last penny. To a character like that, it's just, to him, his integrity is his life. And that's, the more I think maybe we see that depicted in art, the more we will see people following that example. So that's something I would offer. Anyway, music piracy was rampant. The music industry was suffering. So from, like, let's say the 1999 through 2005 or so, being a musician was not a money-making venture to a very large degree. Then came iTunes. So big tech, right? Silicon Valley, the market came up with this very, very clever and innovative and useful program, iTunes, in which anyone who wishes to buy music can do so still from their own home on their computer and conveniently download the album that they want to get or the song that they want to get for a few dollars. And it really, it saved a lot of the music industry, I think. Not to the degree that the major labels would have wanted it. They were still suffering for a while after that. But iTunes and similar technologies gave life, certainly, I think, to a lot of independent artists. So from, let's say, 2006, 7 through 2011 or so, if you are a musician that had any degree of popularity, iTunes was your best friend, because now you're not only able to reach fans around the world through the internet, but if any of them want to support you or they want to consume your music, and they're basically honest people, they're not fans, they're maybe not necessarily savvy in the technology of piracy, but also they're just not, it's not really on their mind. They're the types of people that, I don't know, they go to the store, they buy stuff. So they also tend to look for the honest way to download music on the internet. They would use iTunes, and next thing you know, as an independent artist, you're making a great living. So iTunes and similar software was a wonderful thing for independent artists, and it definitely gave major label artists a lot more money than they would have been making but for iTunes. But still, the music industry was suffering. And then came music streaming. And I think music streaming really, really helped save the music business. Things like Spotify being the major example of a music streaming software. Apple soon after, or a few years later, offered their own streaming service. And today, Apple, they don't even want you to use iTunes. You need to like work to get access to iTunes on your computer. If you're a Mac user, or if you just have iTunes, try to buy an album right now and just see how many clicking you have to do, how much clicking you have to do. They don't want you to actually buy music now. They want you to stream it. Like that's what they're going for. Music streaming has become the sort of savior of the major labels. As far as the independent artists who were largely elevated by iTunes and people purchasing music, I think streaming has been a downgrade. It's been kind of a pay cut, because streaming is great. If you're popular, streaming is great for independent artists. It's a hell of a lot better than nothing. But you know, the lead singer of the band Slipknot, you may know them. I'm pretty sure they're signed. They're with a major label, but they're more they have more in common with independent artists at this point, in that they're not being promoted in the mainstream the way they were. They're not nearly as popular as they were in the early 2000s. So the lead singer of Slipknot was going public with how much he hates music streaming. He was saying like, this does not compensate artists very much, and he hates it. And he says, if you really love music and you love the musicians, buy their albums. He says, buy their music. You know, use iTunes or buy their physical CDs. That's what he was saying. And I remember thinking to myself, like, okay, nobody told you to have 9 members in your band. If you're familiar with Slipknot, there's like 3 drummers. There's a guy who hits a keg. Like, that's his instrument. He hits a keg. It's part of their image, their gimmick, I guess, if you want to put it that way, is that they have like 8 or 9 members of the band. It's pretty silly. So definitely, if you're going to get into music, be a solo artist, I would say. There's no, you know, who wants to have 5 or 4 or 6 band members that you got to split everything with, unless you believe that that's integral to the creative process, or that the image calls for having multiple members. Let's say part of your product is the image of the music, like the image of the group. In that case, obviously, you know, 4 or 5 guys or girls is a big part of it. Anyway, so again, piracy really, really hurt the music business up until around 2005. 2005, iTunes came about, a major game changer, and a lot of people began to use it. And in the years after that, till around 2011-ish, iTunes was your best friend as an independent artist, and also gave a glimmer of hope to the major labels who still were suffering in a major way. Now, music streaming like Spotify, and the degree to which, let's say, YouTube tightened their game with the ability to monetize, and the way that music streaming has become monetizable on YouTube even, and, you know, Amazon and Apple have offered their streaming services. Music streaming has become the name of the game in the world of music. So it made for kind of a big pay cut to a lot of smaller size musicians, but seems to be a savior for the major labels who get ungodly streams. And now they're making ungodly, or at least sufficient money from those ungodly numbers of streams. All right, so that's what sort of brings us to the current era. In the current era, for roughly the past 10 years, Spotify has been the leader of music streaming. So not only is Spotify the place in which most people seem to consume their music, also there's sort of an industry around discovering new music on Spotify. People have playlists. Now, I'll try to explain what that means. Let's say I have a certain taste in music. I really like certain music. I create a playlist, you know, like I save a bunch of songs in a certain order, and then it's open. Anyone in the public can see it. You can see it. And if you come across my playlist and you think, oh, this guy has good taste in music, I like his playlist, I'm going to follow this guy or subscribe to his playlist, or however it works. And then when I add a new song to my playlist, that song gets a lot of publicity. And so now if you're a musician, you might approach me and say, hey, what do you say I give you a little bit of cut of the action if you add my upcoming song to your playlist? So you can see how an industry has developed around the playlist on Spotify. And this is, you know, this is nothing new, really. I mean, DJs have always been sought after by musicians. If you're a musician who's looking to break into the underground scene or into any scene, you might go around from city to city, contacting the most popular DJs, the most popular disc jockeys who work at all the nightclubs, or many of them. Contact them, try to get lunch with them, wine and dine them, try to make friends with them, and maybe even slip them a little bit of money in exchange for them adding your song to their rotation. I mean, this is just the way things go. And Spotify, being the leader of music streaming, also seems to be the platform where user created playlists seem to be the most easy for people to create and for others to discover. Spotify is the place where you want your music added to somebody popular's playlist. Now, what's been happening over the past few days is that with Neil Young leaving Spotify and a few other small, like, you know, let's say, I hate to say this, washed up musicians following suit, it makes you wonder, what if this is actually going to bring about the next stage, the next phase of history? What if some more contemporary musicians start to speak up and say, yeah, you know what? I don't like this Joe Rogan guy. I don't like the fact that an anti-vax podcast is not only allowed on Spotify, but they paid him to come over to Spotify, right? They paid Joe Rogan reportedly $100 million or so to make his show a Spotify exclusive. A lot of people have been resentful at Spotify for a while. So Spotify pays something like, I don't know, a quarter of a penny for every stream. I think something like that. And maybe it varies. There's various ways in which your stream on Spotify could be worth more or less than that. I'm not entirely sure how it works. It probably depends if the person streaming a song is a paid member of Spotify or if they're listening for free with ads, which are very two different rates. The best thing is subscription. So just like on Netflix, right? Netflix, everyone paid to have Netflix. Everyone who's consuming Netflix legally paid for Netflix. And the people starring in Netflix movies and shows are paid very handsomely. So similarly with Spotify, the people watching for free or listening for free to Spotify, their clicks can add up to a decent number of dollars that the musicians are making. But the paid members of Spotify, now those are the ones putting food on the artist's table in a major way. Okay, Spotify, let's say, pays a quarter of a penny for every stream, roughly speaking here. I'm not entirely sure if that's even close to correct, but the last time I kind of looked into it, that's the number that I think made an impression on me. A quarter of a penny. There are musicians out there, there are advocates out there saying, Spotify, pay musicians a penny a stream. The lead singer of Eve 6, you know Eve 6? I would swallow my pride. I would jump on the ride. The laughter will let me up the inside. Whatever he's saying. That guy made a serious comeback to the world via Twitter. He turns out he's very good at gaining traction on Twitter with some of his tweets, the singer of Eve 6. And he's been using his newfound popularity to agitate that Spotify pay a penny a stream. He says, why is Joe Rogan getting $100 million to come over to Spotify, but Spotify can't afford to pay musicians a penny a stream? Now, I don't know what to make of this. A part of me tends to want to stick up for the major corporation in every case and say, we don't really know what their books look like. We don't really know how much of the money they're spending is expected to yield returns. And there's a lot we don't know. But another part of me is saying, like, yeah, you know what, Spotify, quit treating musicians like trash and pay a penny a stream. So I'm not really sure what I think of that. But there have been people for a while saying Spotify pay us a penny a stream. So what if, in light of recent events, you start to see more people pulling their music off of Spotify, and this sort of eclipses an effort to make another streaming platform popular? Let's say it's Apple Music, which is sufficiently popular, but could become more popular, could be a real competitor to Spotify. Or Tidal, Deezer. I mean, there's Amazon Music. So like I mentioned yesterday, Amazon Music announced like a special promotion with Neil Young. And of course, like I said, the cynical people will say, oh, that was the plan all along, right? Neil Young could have only been motivated by that. And this is Marxism. Am I allowed to say that? I know I can hear Nico somewhere saying, no, I'm asking, I'm not being facetious. Is this okay? Is it okay to say this is the influence of Marxism, that anytime someone's making money somewhere, that could have been their only motivation? So America goes into Iraq and Halliburton makes money. That could have been, that could have been the reason that America went into Iraq, right? It couldn't be that philosophy of people had an impact, right? So George W. Bush believes that the Iraqi people have a love of democracy in their heart, and they're just waiting to be freed so that they can live like, modern day pluralistic, enlightenment culture, Jeffersonian Democrats. So this is what George Bush basically believed, right? He took America into Iraq to free them, thinking that the Iraqis would embrace the Western way of life. And, but no, like the sort of, I think, Marxist motivated view is like, oh no, it was Blackwater and Halliburton all along pulling the strings, and the oil companies and this and that. So anytime somebody's making money, you see people saying, oh, that was the motivation all along. That could have been the only reason they had that opinion to begin with, or that was the only cause for their action to begin with. So in this case, we've got Neil Young pulling his music off of Spotify because he feels strongly that vaccines are important, and he feels strongly that Joe Rogan is spreading misinformation. And then Neil Young has a deal with Amazon Music. So of course, cynical people will say, oh, that was the motivation all along. So that, whatever you think of that aspect of it, the point remains that there are going to be opportunities that come of this. The more people do leave Spotify, assuming more people will leave Spotify, it is going to turn into this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy where economic motivations do become the reason that people pull their music off of Spotify. Do you see what I'm saying? I think it is likely to turn into a movement, and you will start to see people pressuring one another off, behind the scenes, musicians and labels and all types of people with influence, pressuring one another. All right, let's pull our music off of Spotify together and stand in solidarity, against Joe Rogan. And it doesn't hurt that we're going to have a good payday when Tidal or Deezer or Amazon or Apple pays us for this new promotion, this collaboration that we're doing. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. This is going to be very interesting for me to see how this unfolds, because Spotify for a long time has been untouchable in terms of how they're the leader of the music streaming game. Like Spotify is it. They're the big one. And everyone else is just wishing they could be as big as Spotify. What if this snowballs? So maybe Spotify is starting to wonder if maybe bringing Joe Rogan over the way they did was not the great idea. I mean, at the time it happened, I was thinking to myself, I hate to use this type of language because it's silly and it's disrespectful, but the word boomer, it's a word that refers to like the older generation who's a little bit out of touch with what's going on. So I have referred to myself as that, even though I'm only 35, but I use that word when I'm confused about something. So please, in this safe space of ours, let me use that word just to articulate my point. I can imagine the boomers in the boardroom at Spotify were saying, okay, we need something big. What's the next big thing? What's the next way to make Spotify super, super relevant and widely used? And the younger guys who are paid to kind of know what's happening in the culture, they're telling them, oh, comedy and podcasting are huge. People love comedy and podcasting. We got to bring that over to Spotify. So how are the boomers at Spotify going to know that Joe Rogan has all of this problematic elements attached to him, that he's a PR disaster waiting to happen? How do they really know that, right? So they're just thinking like, oh yeah, this Joe Rogan guy. So Joe Rogan is like the godfather of comedians and the godfather of podcasters. I mean, he's the godfather of both those things. And certainly when it comes to the two of those together, comedians doing podcasts is something that Joe Rogan sort of is seen as the trailblazer for. Joe Rogan quite literally told his comedian friends, oh, you got to start a podcast. Oh, what do you? He's just like your fans are gonna eat up anything you put out. Just record yourself having a conversation for an hour a week and just watch the money roll in. Maybe I'm the one being cynical here, but he did have that conversation. Whether he used those selling points or not, I don't know. But he definitely told all his comedian friends to start podcasts. And then we see not only that every comedian has a podcast, but then two comedians link up together. And now it's the Fighter and the Kid, or it's Santino and Bobby Lee, or it's just like various duos. And to all of these people, Joe Rogan is like the godfather, who is, the literal father, not literal, but the very much embraced as the sort of father figure, the patriarch of that whole scene. And to the female comedians, the mother, the sort of a matriarch is Whitney Cummings. Oh, Whitney Cummings. Listen to the way female comedians talk about Whitney Cummings. Like, oh, she's like their mother. It's kind of strange. But yes, Whitney Cummings and Joe Rogan, if the two of them started a podcast together, or if they have a baby together and that baby starts a podcast, watch out. Anyway, Spotify wanted to really, really, really get in the game of podcasting, and particularly comedian hosted podcasting. So of course, Joe Rogan was the guy to reach out to, but I don't think Spotify realized the extent to which this would cause controversy. So I'm wondering right now if Spotify is starting to regret that decision. What do you think? I mean, I know they say no publicity is bad publicity, but another cliche is the numbers don't lie. You know what I'm saying? Another conventional truth is if some seriously big artists start to pull their music off of Spotify, let's say it's Drake, huh? Have you heard of Drake? Now that guy is popular. What if Drake decides tomorrow, yeah, I don't like this Joe Rogan guy. I don't like Joe Rogan's guests' views on vaccines. I don't like the way Joe Rogan speaks about, race relations. I don't like the guests that Joe Rogan has on. I'm taking my music off of Spotify, and for the next 30 days, you can get a free month of Tidal, the other streaming service. You can get a month free of that and use promo code Drake. What do you think of that idea, huh? So if that happens, and then if, Slim Shady and Dr. Dre follow suit, what if they announce it right before the Super Bowl where they're going to be performing on? You see what I'm saying? If some seriously big artists start to leave Spotify, and it's a combination of the fact that they hate Trump and they hate Rogan and they hate anti-vaxxers, but also it doesn't hurt that they got a big payday waiting for them on the other side of this move. It could seriously be a game changer. That's what I'm saying. So it's going to be very interesting to see where this goes. Let's jump over to the super chats. We got Marilyn with $4. And then Robert with $5 says, in quotes, how do we encourage the idea that people can be rationally selfish? End quote. It ain't easy, but you're doing it right now. We just need to expand our reach. Well, thank you for that compliment. Enric with $4.99 says, I generally hear that artists only make pennies from streaming. Does streaming compensate long-term? Well, pennies would be nice. Pennies is what artists are fighting for now. A penny a stream would be 4 times more than artists make today. But I mean, look at the numbers. I mean, look at how many millions of views people get on YouTube. So do some math, you get out your calculator, find out roughly the range of what a YouTube view can pay if there's an advertisement on it, and do some math. Look at Spotify. Look, how many streams does this artist get a month on Spotify? You're not entirely going to know how many of those plays are free listeners who are sitting through ads versus people who are paid members, paid subscribers. You don't know that, but you can sort of estimate the range of how much money a stream gets and then multiply it by how many millions of streams that artist gets a month on Spotify. So if you're popular, streaming pays enough. If you're in the band Slipknot and there's 9 members in the band plus a record label that owns a piece of you, maybe it doesn't pay enough to live. But maybe it still does because Slipknot is still a very well-known, popular band. But if you're a new band, depends how popular you are. But, you really want to be a solo artist in the age of streaming. I think, unless, like I said, being a group is part of your image that you're selling, and that obviously is to be taken into consideration. But without question, in my experience and in my opinion, people buying music is the best thing for everyone. People buying music. So if you really do want to support musicians, buy their music, and you can still stream it. You buy the music gets uploaded automatically to your cloud, the cloud service. That cloud service, people pay for that cloud service, and a little bit of a fraction of that subscription fee they pay their cloud service goes to a musician who has their music being uploaded on that cloud service. So generally, how about an all of the above approach? But if everyone who liked music would buy that music, I think musicians would have a better day than they're having. Marilyn with $5 says, so you're calling us boomers out of touch old farts? No, Marilyn, I'm calling us boomers. All right. And of course I was talking to Spotify, the people in Spotify's boardroom who said, well, okay, what's next? Well, comedy and podcasting. That's it. Okay. This Joe Rogan guy is the clear leader of that. Okay. Yes, he is. Also true about Joe Rogan is he's not very discriminatory in who he associates himself with. And he's more popular than God intended. He's more popular than God intended. You know what I'm saying? God, please, it should be clear I'm using these terms in a humorous way. God created the world, and he gave CNN a certain amount of influence. God gave Fox News a certain amount of influence. God gave, Joe Rogan a little bit of influence. But what happened was the devil then gave Joe Rogan more influence than all of the others put together. And the numbers clearly reflect that. It's absolutely insane. So then now we're in a situation where excuse my language, a knucklehead like Joe Rogan, a guy who has done a lot of drugs and plans to continue doing them, is sitting around saying whatever passes through his head, and ungodly millions of people are consuming it, and many of them are being influenced by it. So, like I said, how do we convince the world that rational egoism is a good thing when we see so many people being irrational? How do we convince people that capitalism is a good thing when we see the dumbest people rising to the top? I'm not saying Rogan is the dumbest of the dumb, but in terms of people that have influence, he may be one of the dumbest, excuse me. And also, like I mentioned, there's all these headlines, stock market crashes, Spotify plummets, Spotify rises. And I've been conditioned at this point to not even trust, headlines, and often not even trust articles, because I know clickbait is all these people are doing. And that's not news reporting. It's clickbaiting. Ann M in the regular chat says he's honest. I think referring to Joe. I think he is honest. I just don't think he's very educated. All right. Coming up today at 8:30 p.m. UK time, James Valiant is discussing the aesthetic vacuum of our age, the 1962 radio lecture by Ayn Rand, which I think was also published as a written essay in the Romantic Manifesto. Then at 10 p.m. UK time, it's Kirk Barbera and Tom with a question mark. In my notes here, Dylan put a question mark after Tom. It could be Tom Nowak. He was with Kirk in the past. Anyway, Kirk and Tom are going to be reading and discussing. Oh, you want me to pronounce this? Ulysses? Is it Ulysses? Ulysses. Ulysses. An 1833 poem by Alfred Tennyson. 1833. Oh, and then Dylan wrote me a note. He says, like the president. Oh, that changes everything. I can't tell you how many times a day in conversation I bring up President Ulysses. Actually, is that right? Ulysses H. Grant? Is that one of the guys? Was he the guy from the Civil War? I don't know. Listen, I am like Joe Rogan. I should stay in my lane. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I think we'll jump over to Clubhouse for a little while. Still not quite sure how to pronounce Ulysses. We'll be back here tomorrow for the Daily Objective. And goodbye.